For more than 2 decades, Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq with absolute power. His regime was built on fear, secrecy, and control, a dictatorship that silenced opposition through violence and intimidation. But by 2003, that power crumbled beneath the weight of invasion and rebellion. The man who once saw himself as the modern Nebuchadnezzar of Iraq would soon stand before his people not as a ruler, but as a prisoner. This is the story of Saddam Hussein's capture, trial, and execution, one of the most remarkable and controversial legal proceedings of the 21st century. In March 2003, US-led coalition forces invaded Iraq under the pretext of eliminating weapons of mass destruction and ending Saddam's dictatorship. Within weeks, Baghdad fell. Saddam vanished into hiding, triggering a massive manhunt codenamed Operation Red Dawn. On December 13, 2003, near his hometown of Tikrit, American forces discovered a small underground hideout, a simple hole in the ground, covered with bricks and debris. Inside, they found the former Iraqi president, disheveled, bearded, and weary. The man once feared across the Middle East was captured without resistance. In his possession were a pistol, 2 rifles, and a briefcase filled with US dollars. For millions of Iraqis who had suffered under his rule, this was a moment of vindication. For Saddam, it marked the beginning of his final chapter. After the fall of Saddam's regime, Iraq was in political limbo, occupied by coalition forces and torn by insurgency. Yet amid the chaos, one goal united the new Iraqi leadership: holding Saddam accountable for his crimes. In December 2003, the Iraqi Special Tribunal was established to prosecute former regime members for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Later renamed the Iraqi High Tribunal, it would operate under Iraqi law but with heavy influence and guidance from American officials. The tribunal was controversial from the start. Critics called it a tool of the victors, a political performance staged by those who had overthrown him. Supporters, however, saw it as the long-overdue trial of a man responsible for decades of brutality. The stage was set. Saddam Hussein would finally face justice in front of the very people he once ruled with terror. The tribunal decided to begin with one emblematic case, the Dujail massacre. In July 1982, Saddam's convoy was attacked by gunmen from the Shura town of Dujail. The dictator survived, but his revenge was merciless. Hundreds of men, women, and children were arrested. Many were tortured, executed, or disappeared. The property of entire families was confiscated. In all, 148 residents of Dujail were killed in retaliation. This single event would become the cornerstone of the charges against Saddam Hussein: crimes against humanity for ordering mass murder, imprisonment, and the destruction of a community. The case was chosen because it provided clear documentary evidence, including orders signed by Saddam himself. It was small compared to his other alleged atrocities, but it was manageable in Iraq's fragile judicial system. After nearly 2 years in US custody, Saddam Hussein appeared before the Iraqi High Tribunal on October 19, 2005. He was charged alongside 7 co-defendants, including his half-brother, Barzan Ibrahim al-Tikriti, and former Vice President Taha Yassin Ramadan. As the session opened, the world watched through live broadcast. Millions of Iraqis sat glued to their televisions, witnessing the man who had dominated their lives for decades finally being called to answer for his crimes. Defiant from the start, Saddam refused to recognize the court's authority. He interrupted proceedings, shouting, "You know who you are? You are agents of the Americans." At one point, he declared himself still the legitimate president of Iraq. His behavior alternated between fiery defiance and calm calculation, a performance crafted for both his supporters and history itself. The trial, intended as a symbol of justice, was becoming a stage for confrontation. Over the next year, prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence: government memos, execution lists, and intelligence reports linking Saddam directly to the Dujail killings. Witnesses recounted their suffering in chilling detail. One survivor described how security forces rounded up her family after the assassination attempt, imprisoning them for years. Others recalled electric shocks, beatings, and the loss of loved ones who never returned. These testimonies formed the human heart of the trial, a chance for victims to confront the architect of their misery. But even as the evidence piled up, critics argued that the trial was deeply flawed. Defense lawyers were underprepared and under threat. Judges were replaced mid-trial, allegedly under political pressure. For the tribunal, maintaining legitimacy was as important as proving guilt. But Iraq, fractured by insurgency and sectarian strife, was hardly a place for calm justice. Outside the courtroom, the country was in chaos. Bombings, assassinations, and sectarian killings had become daily realities. In the midst of this turmoil, the trial's defense team became targets. Within months, 3 defense lawyers were killed. One was kidnapped and murdered on his way to court. Each attack deepened concerns that the process was compromised. Even international human rights groups warned that the tribunal risked becoming a show trial, one where the outcome was predetermined. But despite the bloodshed, the trial pressed on, determined to reach a verdict. On November 5, 2006, after nearly a year of proceedings, the Iraqi High Tribunal announced its decision. Saddam Hussein was found guilty of crimes against humanity for the murder of 148 Dujail villagers. As the death sentence was read aloud, Saddam shouted defiantly, "Long live the people! Long live Iraq! Down with the traitors!" In the streets of Baghdad, celebrations erupted. For many Iraqis, this was the moment they had waited for, justice for decades of suffering. Yet in other parts of the country, particularly among Sunni communities, anger and sorrow simmered. They saw the verdict as revenge, not justice. Even in his condemnation, Saddam continued to divide the nation he once ruled. Saddam's defense filed an appeal, arguing that the trial had been politically influenced and marred by procedural flaws. But the appellate chamber of the Iraqi High Tribunal upheld the verdict on December 26, 2006. By law, the execution had to occur within 30 days. The clock was ticking. The Iraqi government faced international pressure. Some nations called for clemency, others demanded swift execution. As the days counted down, Saddam remained calm. In his final days, he wrote a farewell letter to the Iraqi people, urging unity and defiance against foreign occupation. In the early hours of December 30, 2006, Saddam Hussein was awakened and informed that his execution would take place within hours. It was the first day of Eid al-Adha, the Muslim festival of sacrifice, a date that would add symbolic weight to the event. He refused a hood, saying he preferred to face death with open eyes. Witnesses described him as calm and composed, reciting Islamic prayers as the noose was placed around his neck. At approximately 6:05 a.m., Saddam Hussein was executed by hanging. His body was later delivered to his family and buried in his hometown of Al-Ajin near Tikrit. But even in death, controversy followed. Cell phone footage of the execution, recorded by a witness, leaked online, revealing guards taunting Saddam moments before his death. The footage ignited outrage across the world, turning what was meant to be a solemn act of justice into a spectacle of vengeance. Saddam's execution marked the end of an era, but not the end of Iraq's suffering. The years that followed were filled with sectarian violence, insurgency, and political instability. For many, his trial symbolized accountability, proof that no ruler is above the law. But for others, it was victor's justice, carried out hastily under foreign occupation. Historians still debate whether the Dujail trial truly captured the scale of Saddam's crimes, from the chemical attacks on the Kurds to the bloody purges of political rivals. Yet, for victims, even one conviction felt like a moral reckoning. The trial revealed a deeper truth: justice, in times of war and transition, is rarely pure. It is shaped by politics, by pain, and by the desire to close a dark chapter, no matter how imperfectly. Nearly 2 decades later, the story of Saddam Hussein's trial continues to echo through Iraq's history. To some, it stands as a triumph of justice, the moment a brutal dictator faced the consequences of his actions. To others, it remains a reminder of a nation divided, where justice was overshadowed by vengeance and instability. But perhaps the true legacy of the trial lies not in the verdict, nor in the execution, but in the courage of those who dared to speak, the witnesses, the survivors, and the millions who hoped that one day, fear would no longer rule their lives. Saddam Hussein, a man who once wielded absolute power, ended his life on a gallows built by the nation he once controlled. His story remains a powerful reminder that justice, no matter how delayed, can still find its way through the ruins of history.